What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9, and we're going to have some Krennic versus Vader gameplay here. I am playing a Command Krennic, and my opponent is playing Command Vader. We're going to see how we do here. Krennic has access to some very strong removal options with the blue control stuff. So you have, for instance, you have Takedown, you have Vanquish. These are strong cards. These are strong cards that Krennic can use to his advantage. And additionally, Krennic's Restore offers you some nice recovery ability and ability to kind of keep up against a potential aggro opponent. However, in this case, I'm playing against Vader Command, who is very much not an aggro opponent, but rather a later game build and somewhat threatening here. So we will have to see how this goes. So I play a seasoned short trooper to lead things off. My opponent has the first Legion snow trooper. So in this situation, I could potentially, I have a lot of options here. So what I end up doing is I have the option for energy conversion lab into the super laser technician. I could also, but I think what I end up doing here is just taking out the enemy trooper using a snow trooper lieutenant, clearing my opponent's early play. And Vader can, of course, ping my unit off if he has a one cost thing to send in. But in this case, he ambushes a super laser tech, takes out the shore trooper, and ramps up. This is a very classic play, one of the stronger plays you can make, I think, as a command villainy deck. And there's a reason that super laser technician is so widely used. And the synergy with energy conversion lab is also very relevant. Um, so in that situation, not only did my opponent remove one of my units, he also actually got a resource there. Now the funny thing is, he actually misplayed that. What he could have done that would have been higher value is ambush the Snow Trooper Lieutenant, taken him out, and then use the ready resource that he got from the Super Laser Technician to ping the Seasoned Short Trooper with Vader's ability, pick him off as well. So now I'm also going to make a energy conversion lab super laser technician play. Mine's a little lower value because I don't have a natural follow up here that I can spend the two resources on. Um, Although I suppose my opponent didn't end up spending the resource that he had available either. Um, but in this situation, I've done the 2 damage. I'm going to deploy Krennic. Krennic can hit the opposing shore trooper and take him out, do some damage to the enemy base, or I'm sorry, take him out, heal some damage from my base, not do damage to the enemy base, and then while I'm at it, I'll also be able to while I'm at it, I'll also be able to uh, get my Krennic charged up. In this case, my opponent hits Krennic with open fire. I feel like I kind of have to hit that unit anyway at this point, even though I'd kind of rather not, because the open fire there leaves him in a position where the seasoned short trooper can attack and defeat him using the bonus stats that he gets. Although another option there would have been to just take the initiative and then send my snow trooper in to defeat the shore trooper next turn, leaving Krennic on the field. Now my opponent plays the newly previewed Ruthless Raider, I believe it's called. And yeah, Ruthless Raider, 6 cost 4/6. When played or when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. Uses that to remove Krennic, not what I like to see. Um, so I had been planning to play this Academy Defense Walker and give an experience to Krennic and to the Trooper. Now it's only going to be the Trooper. This was sort of my game plan to escape Vader's ping on the wounded Krennic, was the Academy Defense Walker to give him an experience. So in this case, the walker does buff my trooper though, and the trooper then swings in. Thanks to Krennic's passive, each friendly damage unit gets +1/+0. Ends up inflicting 4 damage there with that attack, which is pretty good. But I am feeling a bit. I'm feeling like I'm in a bit of trouble here because Vader is going to deploy, and I don't have an incredibly natural counter to Vader. I do have an overwhelming barrage that I could use with my defense walker to deal 7 damage, but that's actually not lethal because Vader has 8 HP, which would make it a bit of a difficult scenario for me. And, maybe I could deal with him with an attack or something, but actually it's precluded here because my opponent has the overwhelming barrage instead. Ruthless Raider hitting a barrage for 6, defeating the Academy Defense Walker, put another point of damage on the Snowtrooper. And I am feeling very behind at this point. Snowtrooper's going to attack into the base for 4 before he can be pinged away by Vader's ability. But I just, I don't have a ton here. My opponent brings in Vader, and I'm not entirely sure. Actually, my opponent ends up taking this back, and I think what we see here is Vader's ping used first to clear off that trooper before the deployment. That's right. Um, It's one of those kind of one way or another type things because Vader could, of course, attack and the base and deal his 2 damage to the trooper and move them that way. I play an Emperor's Royal Guard, and unfortunately, that's all I play this turn. This is a very weak turn for me. I think I actually, so in hindsight, I think I actually should have played the Vanquish to clear out the Raider because that's actually 6 damage to the base that I would prevent. And then I would take 2 damage from the Vanquish from the Raiders when defeated, but if I did it without any board, there wouldn't really be anything for the Raider to ping unit wise. Um, However, in this situation, I end up just conceding the game. Based on my draw, I don't really have something there to contest Vader. It's going to be a loss for this first round. We are playing with sideboards, so let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard here. I'm going to bring in some of my heavier stuff. So we have this is a game that could go late, so we're going to bring in Devastator in the hopes of winning a very endgame scenario. And we are also looking at bringing in the regional governors. Maybe those can block a overwhelming barrage or similar. And then we're going to remove some cards. And I should say also this isn't like a super defined sideboard. We're going to remove the Death Troopers here. They tend to be or I removed 2 of them. The Death Troopers are kind of a liability because the self ping puts them in position, or the self damage puts them in position to be removed by Vader's ping. So they're really not as good in this matchup as they are in some others. I end up deciding I'm also going to remove Colonel Yularen. His incremental healing is not something that I really need in this matchup. When I actually I would prefer to have those regional governors to potentially block more important plays. So looking at this hand, so I have Relentless, 2 regional governors, a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, a Vigilance, and a Resupply. So this seems like a pretty reasonable hand to keep. I can lead off with the regional governor and then turn to Resupply. Um, and get into a position where it's going to be difficult for my opponent. Um, and at least hopefully. So I play the regional governor. I believe I name overwhelming barrage here, and obviously that's not a card my opponent can play on the first turn. But I want to remove the possibility of being hit by that huge play in the later game if possible. And my hope is that I can keep the governor alive, though we'll have to see. My opponent plays a Death Star Stormtrooper. I'm going to take the initiative. Vader's ping used for 1 damage to the governor, 1 damage to the base, setting up a scenario where the Death Star Stormtrooper can attack and clear the governor in 1 shot. So here what I want to probably do is either entrench the governor and fight, or play a resupply to ramp. Given that I don't seem to have any really awesome 5-cost cards, if I had like Agent Callus or something, have the governor kill the stormtrooper and then resupply would seem more reasonable. But in this case, I'm actually going to go for the entrenching the governor option. So with that entrenched, the governor gets +3/+3, and attached unit can't attack bases. But now a 4/7 has taken 1 damage, so a 4/6. But that's still a lot of stats to have, and should be able to take out that trooper pretty easily, actually staying on the board in the process. And one other cool thing about Entrench is that it can potentially set you up for a strong play with Overwhelming Barrage. My opponent plays a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, sending the Stormtrooper into the base for 5. I then indeed have the governor take out that Stormtrooper. Opponent takes the initiative here rather than using Vader's ping. I have a Super Laser Technician that I can ambush in, take out that take out that shore trooper and get Krennic on the field one turn earlier. Additionally, this time I'll actually be able to make use of the resource by doing a snowtrooper lieutenant with Krennic afterwards. My opponent plays an open fire to clear off my buffed planet regional governor. I keep calling it her planetary governor. There's the energy conversion lab ambush, super laser tech taking out my opponent's unit. Very classic play. Um, my opponent, I believe, I believe incorrectly attempts to use Vader's ability. Um, this doesn't work. There wasn't a villainous unit played this turn. Open fire is only aggression, not villainy. So my opponent just takes the initiative. I'm going to deploy Krennic, and then we have, as mentioned, the Snowtrooper Lieutenant with Krennic, dealing 4 damage to the enemy base and restoring 2 to my base. I see a overwhelming barrage, which I'm pretty happy to see here. That's going to be potentially some real value. But I need to get a stronger unit in play first. Right now, these 2 strength units are not going to give me the biggest barrages in the game. Agent Callus and Vanquish here also give me some good removal options. My opponent plays out a Super Laser Technician using the Energy Conversion Lab to ambush my Snowtrooper. So once again, that classic Super Laser Tech Energy Conversion Lab play, getting big value yet again. And the Krennic's going to swing in there. 2 damage to the enemy base, 2 damage repaired to my base. A cell block guard hits the field, and this is a great opportunity for Callus. Callus is going to ambush and defeat the cell block guard. He does take 3 damage, but my opponent has used all resources. There's not going to be an option for Vader's ping at this time, and Callus is on the field, and because he's taken 1 damage, he's actually strength 5 with the +1 power from Krennic's ability. My opponent deploys Darth Vader. So in this situation, I think what I end up deciding to do is I'm just going to barrage Vader with Callus. Um, because if I barrage Vader with Callus, it won't kill him in 1 hit. Unfortunately, 8 HP is quite a lot. But it will do 7 damage, thanks to that bonus for being damaged, leaving him vulnerable to being removed in 1 attack from Krennic or Callus. Even if my opponent plays a fallen lightsaber, I would still be in position to remove him with an attack from Callus. So there we have the overwhelming barrage. The +2 HP on Callus from the barrage also means that Vader cannot attack the base or Krennic and use his on-attack ability to clear out Callus. I would defeat Callus at the end of the phase once the overwhelming barrage wears off, but Callus would be able to make another attack. Um, So then my opponent does play a fallen lightsaber, and I just attack. Callus defeats Vader, draws me a card, and I believe my opponent actually concedes the game at this point. With Vader handled pretty readily, I have that Vanquish to clear any big threats that my opponent does deploy, and I was going to deploy Piet and be pretty set up for the late game as well. So we're now 1-1, and we're going to move to. I believe we're going to move to game 3 here. My opponent, I think, loads a different thing. I'm not sure if he accidentally deleted some cards or what. I think it ends up being the same deck or a very similar deck. I'm not sure if there are actually any card changes or if it was just like, whoops, I deleted some of my cards by mistake. Let's reload. So now we're going to go into round 3. We'll see how it happens. So I think in the first round, I wasn't able to deal with Vader at all. And in the second round, I was, and that kind of made a major difference. So I mulligan into an odd hand here. I can do Admiral Piet, follow up again with a resupply, get into a better spot. My opponent has a snowtrooper technician or a snowtrooper lieutenant. I said snowtrooper technician, a snowtrooper lieutenant with no target, so he does get a 2/2, but it's one of the weaker early game plays he could make. Facing off against Piet here, it's going to be a problem for him, I think. Opponent spends 3 to deploy a cell block guard. I'm going to counter with a 3-cost Emperor's Royal Guard. So I have the slightly better Sentinel here. I'm feeling like this early position is pretty decent for me, quite frankly. And then I almost attack the enemy base for 1, and I'm like, wait, no, can't do that. And I don't really want to attack the cell block guard there. because Callus could be big value later on, or I'm sorry, Hit could be big value later on. I have drawn Agent Callus and can potentially play him next turn. This turn I have two main options. One of them is resupply into deploying Krennic. The other one is, so my opponent puts a Fallen Lightsaber on his Sublot Guard, which is actually a bit of a problem. That Sublot Guard now a 6/6. Um, so my main options this turn are that I can either resupply into deploying Krennic this turn, or I can deploy the System Patrol Craft. I ended up deciding that because the situation looks pretty unsafe on the ground, Krennic would have to attack into a 6/6 guard, which he does not want to do. It's better for me to just go ahead and deploy the System Patrol Craft to develop my board. My opponent pings Callus, or pings Piet. I'm going to take the initiative. Cell Block Guard takes out my Emperor's Royal Guard. And then the it does have 3 damage on him, and then the guy there is going to hit my base for 2. So in this situation, I can now deploy Krennic. I'm going to resource the resupply since there's not much point in ramping now. Unfortunately, this cell block guard is still a major problem for me. One thing that I could do is I could ambush the cell block guard with the Emperor's Royal Guard that I have in hand, which would clear both units. I'm not sure if that would be the highest value, um, because it would require me to use the energy conversion lab. So what I end up doing is, because I have 2 copies of Agent Callus, I'm going to use one of them to just trade with that guy. Really not a very high value play, not what I really want to see, but it is what I end up doing. My opponent has a Callus of his own, taking down Admiral Piet. And unfortunately, we have a major game affecting misplay here, which is that he only takes 1 damage from Piet, but should have taken 2. And that's actually a big problem because if he had taken 2 damage, I could attack with Krennic and clear Callus. But it seems like we forgot the +1 power from Krennic there. So pretty unfortunate. I would much rather have cleared Callus on that turn than cleared that snowtrooper. So of course Krennic could now attack and clear Callus on strength 3 thanks to the passive ability that we sadly forgot last turn. And energy, so we have an ambush here with a super laser technician. That does mean Vader can now be deployed. It also means that if Krennic attacks Callus, then they will both be defeated, which will cause my opponent to draw a card. Not loving it. Um, and I play an Emperor's Royal Guard. That's gonna hopefully kind of protect for a bit. But the problem is Vader can just deploy now, and I am in big trouble here. Um, I could deploy the regional governor. Yeah, so I can deploy regional governor and say overwhelming barrage. I could also just attack the base with Krennic. I end up attacking the base with a system patrol craft instead. I'm not entirely sure why I do that. Unfortunately for me, my opponent plays Vader's lightsaber and just removes Krennic with the 4 damage there, I believe. So very unfortunate scenario, and I am now in quite a bit of trouble. And actually, I think I end up just calling the game here. I don't really have a clear answer. Don't really have a great way to get out of this with no real answers to Vader. I could have deployed the regional governor. The problem is then Vader can kill my Emperor's Royal Guard, and then Callus can kill the governor. Um, and then I'm still left with Vader could deal 2 damage to the system patrol craft as well, and I'm just left in a very bad situation. So unfortunately, this one we're just going to call it there, and that's going to be another loss. Difficult scenario, really. I think that one really notable thing about this is these games. So earlier, I was playing some games with Tarkin Green, or with Tarkin Ramp rather, and it seemed to show that Tarkin Ramp just isn't getting the most value out of those ramps compared to something like Vader. And in these games, Krennic Green, honestly, same problem. The ramp tech just not so good when you have a 5 resource leader. We saw games where I would get multiple ramp pieces and end up just resourcing them instead of getting big value out of them. Vader loves seeing multiple ramp pieces, but for a deck like this, multiple ramp pieces are not very valuable and can be a liability later in the game in particular. Um, I think that ultimately this ramp stuff is just not as good when you have a leader that deploys on 5 resources. It's just really not. And as a result of that, I think this style of Krennic deck is going to considerably underperform a Command Vader when it comes to when it comes to getting a good ramp game plan going, because those extra ramps for Vader are getting close to bringing out a very powerful leader. Extra ramps for Krennic are kind of wasted. And Krennic isn't so much more powerful early on in order to make up for it. The one game that I did win was one where I was prepared to deal with Vader when he arrived. I feel like that's something that you really need to do, but Krennic just doesn't really put you in a position to do that. So ultimately, I think this sort of Krennic ramp deck is a pretty weak option compared to Vader ramp. Um, it does have some advantages. If you do get into the very late game, like having dealt with Vader, it's in a pretty good position. And Krennic's Restore can also be quite helpful. Krennic's Restore and like unit balance can be quite helpful in the early game against aggro. I think Krennic is in a better spot against aggro, as he's a ramp deck that's in a better spot against aggro than Vader, in my opinion. But I think he's just so far behind against Vader himself, or even against like I don't know, other ramp style decks or mid range style decks that are getting more value are I think going to be kind of better fits. So ultimately, I think Krennic is not really there yet as a top level deck. I could be wrong. We haven't included that new Biker Scout that was just previewed yesterday. That wasn't out when this video was recorded, and I do think that card is helpful for Krennic. I think there are definitely also potential future things that could be quite solid, but at least in this scenario, it seemed like Krennic was at a substantial disadvantage compared to Vader, and that the ramp stuff continues to not quite synergize with a leader that deploys on 5 resources. Um, so I do think Krennic has his niche. He's a ramp deck that does better in the very late game thanks to his blue removal, and he also has access to that restore from himself, and to some other cards like Entrenched that can be helpful when dealing with aggro. But ultimately, I think that he is not quite there yet. We'll have to see where the meta turns out. As it stands right now, I would be a little worried about playing Krennic in a tournament or similar because of the risk of playing other decks that execute your same game plan better, most notably Vader Green. But yeah, I do think that that's not to say Krennic's useless. I did win one of these games, and I've had competitive games. I've had competitive games with him against other leaders as well. But right now, in where the meta currently stands, I do think that the big ramp game plan on 5 resource leaders is just not quite as good. Now, I do know some people are playing big ramp with Boba. One difference is that Boba makes much more of an impact on the field compared to Krennic or Tarkin. Another difference is that a lot of the Boba Green decks are not playing maximum ramp. I think there's a fair few of them that are only playing Super Laser Technician and not Resupply. Resupply is kind of the slower card of the two. But the Super Laser Technician is able to get some board, especially when paired with the Energy Conversion Lab, while also ramping. And so those Boba decks aren't quite as dedicated to the ramp game plan, and often also aren't relying on big later game stuff as much. They have a lot better early game fighting abilities with cards like Shoot First, Boba Disintegrator, stuff like that. Okay, so that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks to you all for watching. We'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. And if you want to check out my Command Krennic deck list, despite my misgivings about the style, you can check out the link in the video description below. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content.